Hello, and welcome to Wrestling with Poetry, Season 2, Kalamazoo, Michigan's premier wrestling and poetry podcast. Today, the wonderful poet, Debrah Morkun. For our wrestling topic today, profile of an extremely cool dude, an appreciation of wrestling legend Mick Foley. It's an appreciation, but not because he's dead. He's still very much alive. First, Debrah Morkun. Debrah Morkun believes in near-death experiences and prays to the old gods. She practices magic and the coin toss, synthesizing the two into holy orders. She is the author of Projection Machine and the Ida Pingala, as well as several chapbooks. Debrah is currently working on 2 long poems, The Sea Tattoo and Hera Calf, as well as several daybooks chronicling her travels. She currently resides in Philadelphia, but travels often to Carpinteria, California, to study depth psychology. She has recently been appointed the new poetry editor for an ongoing online poetry anthology called Ragana. Visit Debrah at www.debrahmorkun.net. Visit Ragana at fairiesinamerica.com/Raganas.
The city where the rivers stretch, a powerful overture to the refusal to live in exile and be far from this earth where this polemic approaches them with the vacant demand to loosen the chains of this woman shaking by the altar. For I won't live in a copper city. I won't cling to your neighboring planets. Virgil leads us to the iron claw of the monster who spits the antibodies that protect the entire city from the bragging tensions of the men slain simply by a whistle, or that giant horse as tall as the Milky Valley, envious as the latitudes of the rounded globe. My body in the running wave. Historical charm. I have entered the tower. Ulysses. Brave lunar moist body. Rich altars. Nymphs don't profess to be vehicles for leaving. Rather, we designate the no longer living to be golden bulls confronting the larger living cardinal points. Vast seas. My body in the running waves. A torch aloft. Water moves. It moves with little impulse. I was on the road that leads to the stable. It was the 3rd day after Lunar New Year. I did not feel stable in myself, but only because the firmament was missing and the tide was churning. But not amiss from this position is that the Academy is the thorn in the motion detector, American enough to semiotic square the songs from the radio. But that was several decades ago, so no matter. No dream, of course, to unearth a testimony of freedom, while the blues are dispensed from every boardroom across every hall, down the freezing liminalities of America post-doom machine, post-wrecking ball, America after the hour, after the long hours, in the home office, once the schools close and the tides wear thin, all the comportments, united past the beckoning, finitude, ruins. Ambivalence pulled from one page of the Mercy book and placed in another stage of the battleship. One red peg placed where the army fighter ship's submarine, a process remedy to fire one castaway, no more islands to evacuate, romance on the balance board, abject. Another detected scene from the star camera. We caught you on the screen. We see you, as if projected on the walls of our home caves, down another cul-de-sac, down another discursive juncture. Transpersonal song from the transpersonal space. 1. Idealized form. Maybe the plainness of this directional field could be embraced, but never understood. Brittle cement, porridge road, well before the invention of doves, the deflation attempt, to take myself out of the picture, to understand how the spring chooses its own inlets and tributaries. the raft, the rapids. Another junction far from Missouri, where one could still light out for the territory to find a stonier road. Well before the invention of the occipital field. Island, far from the shame lurking in the corner. I was wading out far past where I should, and the gender-neutral sea continued to carry me to the furthest reaches. He stood before me and showed me keys. "Those keys are bronze," I said, and he gestured to the other shore. "What's over there?" I asked. He was speechless, just like in the other story, in which I couldn't find the right words. He pointed again to the other shore. Just then I remembered I had seen a billboard as I drove up I-95 that read, "The Other Shore," and had a picture of bronze keys under red lettering. It's a fable, I thought. I looked at his face more closely and swore I saw Mordred, ready to head up to the tragic end. If we interpret The Other Shore using the gifts of new criticism, one would have to look into the biography of the poet to ascertain the symbolic meanings of shores and keys. It is enough to say this form of lit crit is a humble sham, yet we often placate our fathers by thinking this way. When I was a child, I read Rumblefish after I saw the film starring Matt Dillon. The cacophony of music indicates that the churchyard is grim. The overly gendered mortuary stands in the rye field just past my heart. Though this seems sentimental, and I am not like that, sometimes ending poems on the heart note does suffice. Don't misread this as a love poem, for no one could be pleased with such a reading, and will assume the reader needs to better interpret the meaning of the silent man in the poem. Instead of ending on the image of a beating heart, suddenly the poem harkens to the golden age of silent film. Helen Hayes, master actress, points her baton at the end of this piece. 2. The feel-good idealization. The settling of atomic energy, and the energy is raising. A nuclear field. I stood where there may be a landmine. I walked into the burning forest to relinquish all my devil's pottery, to set it ablaze as if the forest is hell. In earlier stories, the woods often symbolize a place to hide when seeking erasure. I carried several letters to a forest glen, clutching torchlight. The first letter was addressed to Henry, beseeching him to go to the Bodhi tree. Another letter was Henry's response, in which he wrote, "The forest animals are a fright at this time of year. It is better for us to wait until next winter, when Bernadette will have returned to the Book of Days, and you will be writing a timeless nothing." The third letter was a beleaguered note I wrote in response to Henry's response. "Don't write to me about forest creatures," my letter began. I rode my bike from one side of Hoi An to the other. I appreciate different forms of architecture. Each building bespeaks another story. Yet here in Fishtown, they are tearing down beautiful buildings and replacing them with prefab housing units. I do not know what to say to you now that you don't even remember the speed with which they erect these buildings. I have timed out. And this Mars planet I forgot, this red planet lying in wait, unlike Jupiter Row, where the good luck comes up, the turnip mud, enough to make a patty cake baker's man roll it fast, oh man, in the back corner, still as a whistle, feral as tinsel. You don't speak, so I can speak. This memory of some rhyming wish. Shoot the stars so high so we can catch them. My child's face, my infant's face, this old man in the boardroom who tightens his muscles to iron his scarf, with his wife pitying patty cake, his baker on the concourse, his baker on the railway, his baker a model, a strange one, a tapestry. 82 beats later, and I'm counting surplus. I'm counting the vases in bulk. I'm searching the catalog. Maiden girl, forest girl, this man on the back road, this man building fences, concrete, durable, steady, red planet, not Jupiter.
Thank you, Deborah. That was fantastic. Last season, I said that the 33rd episode would be the final episode. I guess that's not true. This is going to be season 2. There are going to be videos to accompany the podcast. The podcast will come to life when circumstances deem it favorable. Last Saturday, I met the wrestling superstar Mick Foley at Fanfare Comics in Kalamazoo. We didn't really talk at length, but he is the nicest famous person that I have ever met. Easily as nice as Morgan Fairchild. I'm just realizing that Morgan Fairchild and Mick Foley have the same initials. I guess I like MFs. If you don't know Mick Foley, he wrestled under the names Cactus Jack, Mankind, and Dude Love. His heyday was in the 1990s, so it's kind of remarkable how well remembered he is today. And for those of you who like titles, his was the Attitude Era of pro wrestling. That would be 1997 to 2002. Other Attitude wrestlers were Al Snow, Bret the Hitman Hart, The Rock, Ric Flair, Chyna, Booker T, Jacqueline, and that's just to name a few. It's a huge list. Mick Foley was famous for the punishment that he absorbed, and his matches were extreme. They were involving barbed wire was the cactus and the Cactus Jack thing. There were also massive leaps and very, very intense falls. Some facts. Mick was born in Indiana in 1965, but he was raised on Long Island in a hamlet by the name of East Setauket. But what made Mick want to be a wrestler? In 1983, Mick went to see the historic steel cage match of Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who wrestled Don Morocco. And famously, Jimmy leapt off the top of the 15-foot cage onto the magnificent Maraca, who was then already on his back. You could see this footage online. So I like Mick because he is a friend to other wrestlers, and as a human, he's always evolving. He wrote Have a Nice Day, A Tale of Blood and Sweat Socks. That's from 1999, and it was a bestseller. And he also wrote Foley is Good, and The Real World is Faker Than Wrestling, 2001. I'm trying to get my hands on a copy of this because it sounds great. Now he does stand-up, and he even performed in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is a major performance mecca. He's really cool to his fans. When I met him, he was so gracious, and he gave me a beautiful autographed card. Well, I did give him a book of poetry, and I did tell him about the wrestling thing. You know, it was an exchange. It wasn't just me being a vampire. I have never met a cooler wrestler. So, Mick Foley, I salute you. May you continue in great health and with a ton of happiness. And Debrah Morkun, I salute you. May you continue to prosper and thrive. Events. Satellite Records has an open mic almost every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. That's 808 Southwest Nedge here in Kalamazoo. Also, in the wrestling front, Independence Pro Wrestling has an event called Pink Out. It's in Ann Arbor at the Holmes campus, 112 Jackson Plaza, Sunday, October 12th, 2024. Doors open at 6. The match begins at 7. Thank you for listening to the show. See you next time.